extraordinary efforts of the American people. We continue to see every day evidence that cases are declining, hospitalizations are declining. That's a tribute to the American people. Frankly, it's a tribute to all of those governors in both parties across the country who put these mitigation efforts into effect. Secondly, the president made it clear to us that we were to make sure that hospitals in impacted areas had the resources and the equipment that they needed to be able to save as many lives as possible. And I have to tell you, the tens of millions of personal protective equipment that we coordinated for delivery around the country, especially in areas most impacted, and the fact that ventilators have been delivered in areas across the country so that no American who needed a ventilator has ever been denied a ventilator. We're actually increasing the stockpile today. But testing has been a focus of ours as well from the very beginning, and it's the reason why the president early on brought in this vast array of commercial labs that took us from 80,000 tests 1 month ago to now 4 million tests as of yesterday. And as we'll make clear again to governors tomorrow on our weekly conference call, we look forward to continuing to partner with governors all across the country as we continue to scale testing, because we really believe that while we're doing 150,000 tests a day now, that if states around the country will activate all of the laboratories that are available in their states, we could more than double that overnight and literally be doing hundreds of thousands of more tests per day in a very short period of time. But Chuck, just so we're very clear, when the president outlined his guidelines for opening up America, we laid out a plan for both for when and how we thought it was best, according to our best scientists and advisors, for states to be able to responsibly and safely reopen. And we believe today, as Dr. Birx has said, as Dr. Fauci and others have said, is that there is a sufficient capacity of testing across the country today for any state in America to go to a phase 1 level, which contemplates testing people that have symptoms of the coronavirus and also doing the kind of monitoring of vulnerable populations.
And I had that test, and so did my wife, June.
That we ought to be watching very carefully for outbreaks of the coronavirus.
Right here in Independence, Kentucky.
With the governors, as we'll continue to partner with them, that we can activate labs around the country, and that states today, if the governor so chooses, have sufficient testing to be able to move into the testing contemplated in phase 1.
Do you believe governors are not activating their testing capacity? I mean, these governors have said they'd love to enhance their capacity, but they're missing swabs, or they're missing the reagents, or, you know, in one cases, Governor DeWine has told me that they've been rationed. That is what, you know, I guess the question is this: why haven't you used the Defense Production Act to basically get swabs and reagents prioritized?
What we've done through FEMA and through U.S. Public Health Service is literally marshal the full resources of the American economy. We've been bringing medical supplies, including testing supplies, in from all over the world, and we'll continue to do that. But as you said, Chuck, I've been working almost daily over the last 2 months with Republican and Democrat governors across the country. And this vast and complex system of testing, using the commercial labs around the country and using hospital and public labs, is a new concept. And so we've been working with governors around the country to make sure that they and their health officials know about all the resources in their states. And we also have deployed a team from Walter Reed that over the last 2 weeks has been calling every single laboratory in the country that can do coronavirus testing. And tomorrow we'll be presenting all of those details to governors so that they can activate those tests in their state.
Mr. Vice President, aren't you making the case of why this needs to be nationally coordinated? I mean, you just said you've identified this capacity, you've identified this. This is why I think a lot of governors have said the federal government has to play point on testing. Is there even a single person who is sole focus is on what is happening with our testing strategy in this country, and how are we going to expand it?
Chuck, we actually have coordinated it at the federal level. Admiral Brett Giroir of the U.S. Public Health Service spends all of his time coordinating testing, deployment, and resources deployment from FEMA. And what we're making clear to governors, and I want the American people to know, is that we will continue to do that. While the president has made it clear that we want the governors to implement testing and deploy testing where they deem it's most appropriate in their state, well, we're going to continue to fully partner with states around the country to increase the supply, to make sure that they have the reagents and the test kits necessary to perform those tests. But I want to say again, it is truly, it's a tribute to the president's leadership that early on in this process,
That's right.
in the top commercial labs in the country, they formed an alliance, and we went from 1 month ago to 80,000 tests being done to 4 million tests being completed as of yesterday. We'll continue to increase that. We'll continue to make
The president's team did that. It's time the governors took the responsibility and did something themselves besides whine.
We want to make
One.
sure workers at the local level have the resources they need, because it's locally executed. It is state managed, but it's federally supported. And the federal government at the president's direction will continue to support governors as they deploy the testing resources in the time and manner of their choosing. But we believe today, as Dr. Deborah Birx has confirmed, is we have a sufficient capacity of testing today for any state in America to move into phase one and begin the process of reopening their state and their economy.
That's right.
Who should pay for the contact tracing? Is that going to be the states? Is it individual companies? Or should the federal government, since you're requiring contact tracing, be a part of this? Is the federal government going to pay for that?
The CDC is deployed across the country today, literally in every state. But at the president's direction, as we announced last week, the CDC is going to deploy teams in every single state in the country to do contact tracing over the next 12 to 18 months. The CDC is really the expert at contact tracing, and it really is, Chuck, the way that we typically control the outbreak of infectious disease. You identify someone who has symptoms, you test them, and then you immediately find out who they've been in contact with. That's what the CDC does. And as we announced last week, we'll be deploying coronavirus CDC teams in every state in the country on top of the hundreds of CDC personnel that are already embedded in states today.
Is one of the reasons we're behind on testing because of I saw the FDA came out and said basically the CDC's initial test was faulty, that they found a lot of bad parameters that weren't, or guidelines that weren't followed, that ended up having that. How much did that set us back as a country? How many lives, unfortunately, might have been lost due to this faulty test kit?
I've seen that report in the papers this morning, and I know that HHS is making inquiries, but we believe those issues were resolved on that particular test by early February. But it's important for your viewers to know that that test, the slow lab-based test that is typical for CDC and public health labs, would never have been able to meet the needs of testing in this coronavirus epidemic. That's why President Trump was so right when he brought together these commercial labs and formed a consortium and
That's right.
took us from, at that
But the
time,
Democratic governors don't want to accept the fact that the president handled it with great leadership, and neither does Chuck Todd.
This isn't
We
nationally
believe we'll have
coordinated.
done more than 5 million tests before the end of this month. None of that would have been possible without the president's leadership, without the innovation, without the incredible efforts of companies like Roche and Abbott Laboratories. And the American people can be confident that whether it is supplies, whether it is testing, we're going to continue to make sure that our governors, our state healthcare officials, and most especially our healthcare workers have the resources and the support they need. But I want the American people to know that sitting here this morning, we really are seeing encouraging signs because of what the American people have done. We believe we are slowing the spread. There's a downward trajectory beginning in even some of the hot spots around the country. And now more than ever, it's important that each of us continue to do our part And I can assure the American people that at the president's direction, we'll continue to play our role. We'll have a full partnership with governors around the country. And we will
ask you about the
someday
president.
in the near future, we will put the coronavirus in the past.
Let me ask you about the president's tweets on Friday. He wants to liberate Minnesota, liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia. All three states have issued guidelines that follow the national advice that you've been giving them. They're following the president's guidelines to the best.
No, they aren't either. They're leaving liquor store opens and abortion clinics open.
I don't quite.
And they're trying to stop people from having in their car church services.
Wants to reopen America more than President Donald Trump. And I think the American people have known that.
And in Virginia, the governor there, Democratic governor, is trying to take people's rights away in the Second Amendment of being able to purchase guns.
Because the reality is that for all of the sacrifices the American people have made, sacrifices that literally have saved lives, the truth is that there are real costs, including the health and well-being of the American people, to continue to go through the shutdown that we're in today. And so the president laid out new guidelines for every state in the country.
I understand that.
To say that if you've seen cases decline for 14 days, if you're in a position to do the kind of testing and you have the
Chuck, shut up and let the vice president speak.
Every state to examine the way to go to phase one, and that's the new guidance that we're giving.
I understand that. I've given you a lot of leeway here. I've not been wanting to interrupt you.
You've been interrupted all the time.
On some things. I've given you a lot of leeway. Why is the president trying to undermine the guidance you've been laying out? And
he's not, Chuck.
Thursday and undermined it on Friday.
Chuck, I don't accept your premise, and I don't think most Americans do either. The president's made it clear he wants to reopen America, and we laid out guidelines for every state in the country to safely and responsibly reopen their economy at the time and manner of their choosing. We laid out the criteria for when our best scientists believed that would be appropriate, if there was 14 days of declining cases and they had proper hospital capacity, and we laid out the means that they could move into phase one. When you hear the president, when you see people across the country talking about reopening, every American and this president want to do that in a safe and responsible way. The guidelines for opening up America are a framework for doing that, and we'll work with governors across the country to implement those because we want to put America back to work as soon as we responsibly can. And at the president's direction, we're going to continue to work to do that every day.
It does seem as if the president wants credit for reopening the economy, and he wants the governors to get the blame for not opening it fast enough. That's what the tweet seems to imply. That
Nonsense, Chuck. Quit making it biased political. You're not even a newsman. You're a disgrace.
That this president wants to reopen the American economy as soon as we can safely and responsibly do it. But we believe with the guidelines, open up America again. We've given governors around the country our very best counsel about how they can do just that. And we'll continue to work with governors to make sure that they have the guidance, that they have the counsel, and they have the resources to accomplish that. And to put the coronavirus in the past someday and to put America back to work.
And I just want to clarify one other thing. You said that you believe 5 million tests by the end of April is a success story. The fact that we have yet to, that will mean we have yet to test 2% of the population. That is a success story on testing?
Chuck, we believe that under the phase one criteria that we have a sufficient amount of testing at that level to allow states to begin to responsibly reopen. And literally doing more than 150,000 tests a day now, a number that we believe we could double once we activate all the laboratories around the country. We're confident that that would enable any governor who's otherwise met the criteria of 14 days of declining cases to be able to have the testing capacity sufficient to monitor people that may have symptoms so we can identify them and do contact tracing, and also deploy the resources of vulnerable populations, nursing homes, and particular vulnerable populations in our city to ensure that we don't see a resurgence of the coronavirus. So yes, we think we've laid a strong foundation for testing for phase one, and we're going to continue to expand testing going forward for the nation.
That's right, Chuck. Listen to him. It's phase one.
Mr. Vice President, it was nice to see some normalcy yesterday at the graduation ceremony at the Air Force Academy. I think a lot of people are hoping for more and more normalcy when the time is right. Thank you for coming on.
Another slam at the president there, huh, Chuck?
When we come back,
shame on you.
Trump has left the reopening of states to governors, some of whom are being pressured by what appear to be coordinated anti-social distancing campaigns from the right. I'll talk to two of those governors from Michigan and Ohio next. How and when to begin the tricky task of slowly reopening their states. At the same time, demonstrations have broken out across the country, particularly in the Midwest, by protesters demanding states loosen their coronavirus restrictions and allow people to get back to work soon. Two governors who have seen some protests in their states are with us this morning, Democrat Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan and Republican Mike DeWine of Ohio. Governors Whitmer and DeWine, welcome back to Meet the Press. I want to start with something that the Vice President said, and I want to confirm it with you all. He says that every state has enough testing capacity and enough equipment to begin enough testing to get through phase one. Governor DeWine, is that true in Ohio?
Well, first of all, Chuck, we've had a great partnership with the president and vice president. 3 weekends ago, I called the president about a real problem we had about sterilizing mask, the N95 mask, and that was an FDA problem, and the president got that done. Our big problem today, I could probably double, maybe even triple testing in Ohio virtually overnight if the FDA would prioritize companies that are putting a slightly different formula together for the extraction reagent kit. And if the FDA would do that, we have a shortage, worldwide shortage of some of the materials that go into this. So we really need help. Anybody the FDA is watching, this would really take our capacity up literally, Chuck, overnight. And that's what we need to get moving in Ohio.
All right, there's the answer in Ohio. You need more federal help. Governor Whitmer, do you have enough right now or testing, both capacity and equipment, to have enough testing to do this phase one guideline?
Well, similar to Ohio, I think part of the story in Michigan is we have the capacity to double or triple the number of tests that we are doing, but we need some of these supplies. The reagents and the swabs are absolutely essential. You can't process all these tests if you can't take the sample and protect it and move forward through testing. And so while our capabilities are there, these important supplies are not. And that's, I think, one of the points that you were making in your interview is that if the federal government would use the Defense Production Act and say, we're going to make every swab people need, and we're going to expedite creation of the reagents, we would be able to know how prevalent COVID-19 is. It would take down the risk associated with taking actions to re-engage parts of our economy, because we would have a lot more data about how prevalent COVID-19 still is in our states.
All right, let's talk about the issue of reopening the economy. Governor Whitmer, I want to start with you. You saw those protests, so let me ask this. Do you have any regrets on any of the restrictions that you have put into place?
I don't, and here's why. Michigan right now has the third highest number of deaths from COVID-19, and yet we're the 10th largest state. We have a disproportionate problem in the state of Michigan, and so we could take the same kinds of actions other states have, but it doesn't rise to the challenge we're confronting, and that's precisely why we have to take a more aggressive stand. It's working. We are seeing the curve start to flatten. But as people come in from across the state and gather and congregate without masks, without standing 6 feet apart, without those important protections, it means that they might have gone back to these parts of our state and perhaps brought COVID-19 along with them. Our rural hospitals are not equipped to handle a big surge, and that's why this important steps that we've taken are just critical to continuing to flatten that curve.
Governor Whitmer, I want to stay with you here a minute on this issue, though. I'm just curious, what have you learned about people's patience, I guess, and your citizenry's patience? And are you contemplating figuring out how to balance that a little bit? How do you essentially open a steam valve a little bit so that you don't so that these protests don't become distractions to the greater good?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, every executive order that I've taken weighs heavily on me. I know when we pull kids out of school, that means they're not getting the education they need, and some of them aren't going to get the meals that they've come to rely on. I know that when we shut down bars and make restaurants dine out only, there are businesses that may never open again, and a lot of people are going to get laid off. These stay-home orders weigh incredibly heavy because I know there's an economic cost. I know there's a mental health cost. People are struggling with this isolation that we have, on top of all of the other stressors. But the fact of the matter is, we have to be really smart about how we proceed. I'm glad to see that the White House recommended opening in phases or waves or whatever terminology you want to use. The fact of the matter is, we can't just turn back to what life was like before COVID.
Nobody's asked you to.
We have to be careful.
Goodness gracious.
Different sectors of our economy. How often do they interact with the public? How close are they work together? Are they indoor or outdoor? Do they share tools and machinery? I mean, all of these are factors that have to go into a really thoughtful situation where we start to phase back in sectors of our economy. But we're doing this calculation every day and looking to when we can do that safely, because the worst thing would be a second wave.
Governor DeWine, Congress is...
What about the nobody rides in the car except one person rule? What about your abortion clinics remaining open?
Financially, there's going to be some partisan back and forth, and you may have personal views on this, but let me ask you this. Congress's priorities here on the small business fund, unemployment insurance, that help to the states, help to the hospitals, what do you want to see Congress? Should they prioritize one or the other, or should all three, states, hospitals, and that small business fund, be prioritized simultaneously?
Well, all of these are very important. What we really need at our local government level, as well as at the state level, is just more flexibility. We're looking, as you can imagine, Chuck, when we have a downturn in the economy, two things happen as far as the state is concerned or local government. Your revenues go dramatically down and the costs go dramatically up. So just more flexibility so that we can fight this virus, but at the same time be able to educate our children, be able to take care of people who have mental health challenges. That's really what we need. So flexibility would be the one word that I would ask from Congress.
Let me ask you this, Governor DeWine. You've had some protests. We've seen that the president's egging on this protest. Is this wise to politicize social distancing right now?
You know, Chuck, the only thing that I've asked our protesters to do is to observe social distancing. We're all big believers in the First Amendment. They were protesting against me yesterday, and that's just fine. They have every right to do that. We're going to do what we think is right, what I think is right, and that is try to open this economy, but do it very, very carefully, so we don't get a lot of people killed. But we have to come back, and that's what we're aiming to do beginning on May 1st. And frankly, it's consistent, very, very consistent with the plan, the very thoughtful plan that the president has laid out.
Right.
Governors Whitmer, Governors DeWine, Michigan and Ohio, respectively, thank you both for coming on and sharing your perspective.
Chuck, you never asked the lady a single question that was difficult. You laid it out there for her to look so innocent.
Credit for reopening the states while leaving the
Shame on you.
Anything that goes wrong to governors. Panel is next. But first, we asked respondents to our poll.
Sometimes, in watching these Sunday morning shows, that they're so biased with fake news, and the people who ask the questions and the people who answer the questions, rarely you might have 1 out of 5 that is pro the president or pro the Republicans. It's so biased. But I need to watch them just so that I can critique them honestly and let you see the facts for yourself at times. And that's what I try to do. And I, quite frankly, am very proud of the President and Vice President Donald Trump and the job that they have done working with all of the governors from both parties and trying to make it as non-political as possible. This is a virus. It isn't a Democratic virus. It isn't a Republican virus. It's a China virus. And in the long run, we need to do the necessary investigations to hold them to their feet to the fire on this, because it was the World Health Authority that failed to act properly. In fact, totally acted, I think, illegally in how they handled the information or lack thereof. So that's my little Travels with the Stephenson show today, a look at the Sunday morning fake news group. And I hope you've enjoyed my critique, and I will pray for all of them involved, and hope that our country gets through this without complete turmoil. And I would ask for you to listen to your church's services today on the internet. We have several we've recommended. Of course, the Bethesda Community Church, which I go to, in Independence, Kentucky, Oak Ridge Baptist in Taylor Mill area in Kentucky, and the English Christian Church down in Carrollton, Kentucky, where my sister and brother and sister and nephew and his family sing and play the worship ministry there at their church in Carrollton, and they're on ECC, I think it is. And so, and then, of course, my old friend French Harmon down in First Baptist Church in Somerset, Kentucky. I have them all listed there on Facebook and their addresses, so you can watch a great sermon. And may God be with you. And remember, it's the Holy Spirit's job to convict. It's God's job to judge. It's my job to love. And I love you all.